some of the sustainability initiatives that PSTA is embarking on. PSTA board recently adopted a sustainable strategic plan that essentially highlights what we can do or what work that we can do that can promote sustainability, reduce our carbon footprint, invest in green technologies, green investments in our county. So to that end, we've already expanded our all electric fleet in our system, and we're looking to add more electric fleet to our system, which is cleaner, it's less noisy, and it reduces our carbon footprint for the agency. We're also working with Duke and other providers for potentially solar panels on our facility, on PSTA facility, to reduce our energy usage and reliance on fossil fuels for getting our energy. We have also invested in an en route charging infrastructure so that any of our all-electric buses can use the en route charging infrastructure for quick charging. And then finally, we are working with City of Clearwater on building a multimodal facility in downtown Clearwater that would be LEED certified. It would have solar panels on the roof and allow for more electric and hybrid electric buses to be used in Clearwater. So that's coming up as well. And then on the more on the futuristic technology and projects, we have partnered recently with Beep on autonomous vehicle pilot programs. And this is essentially a autonomous vehicle shuttle provided by Beep and operated by Beep in a couple of communities to demonstrate how AV technologies could work as a public transportation provider. So far, we have launched this in downtown St. Petersburg by the pier. We've also done a couple of pilot in a couple of weeks in Dunedin, and we're scheduled to be launched in Clearwater Beach in the next couple of months. And we're collecting data in terms of usage, in terms of perception, and how people might use it in the future. And then finally, we're also looking to foray into mass transit, understanding that a county of our size, the county is growing in terms of population, employment. We are looking to put a rapid transit project in place, hopefully by summer of next year. It's under construction. And this rapid transit project connects downtown St. Petersburg to the beaches in St. Pete Beach with dedicated lanes, signal priority, buses with capacity to include bike racks inside those buses, Wi-Fi, and all of those technology elements that I had mentioned in the previous slide. So I will stop here and take any questions, but I just wanted to say in closing that again, PSTA is a lot more than just buses and bus stops. We are looking into technology, we are looking into sustainability and other ways to provide mobility to our residents in Pinellas County. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Any questions?
Just a couple. First, to start with a comment. We talked about it. Well, our first guest, as an employer, specifically called out that one of the reasons it's easy to have to do business in Pinellas County, and particularly Largo, is because of transportation options. So, obviously, that fits right into the conversation we're having now. And Largo, I want to make sure that as we continue to grow, because we're obviously just like Pinellas County continuing to grow, we've got a lot of big projects coming up that we'll be talking about right after you leave, that are going to bring a lot more people to work in Largo, a lot more people to play in Largo, and transportation options have to be available in order to make all of these things viable. So we definitely want, and one of the reasons I wanted this presentation to be made was to be able to have the conversation and have the commission be able to start working with PSTA, understand what some of the, again, PSTA is much more than just buses running down the road at bus stops. So, understand what some of the things are that you guys are doing, and just make sure we have a great relationship so we can all work together moving forward. So that, I just wanted to make that comment, and you guys are, obviously doing very, very good things at PSTA. Being on the board, I can see a lot of alignment with the goals for the city of Largo, and I just really do appreciate that a lot. A lot of those were made before I was on that board, so I can't obviously take credit for that, but you guys are doing really good things. A couple of things I want to talk about. One, can you go back a couple slides, if possible, to the right there? When we talk about the charging for the electric buses, I know the fleet is getting older. There's going to be a lot of new buses coming in. Obviously, the goal for the PST's board is to bring in as much electric as possible. That only works if we have those type of chargers available, right? Because the majority of, the charging that happens right now is all done at PSTA's headquarters in St. Pete. But in order to be able to run all week, or excuse me, all day, there's going to have to be inline charging available. So when we talk about that, some of the biggest routes that are in Pinellas County run right through the middle heart of Largo, right? So is there, those are expensive, obviously. So my question is, what kind of partnership can we have with PSTA, the city of Largo have with PSTA, when it comes to those charging stations? Is it something, I mean, I'm sure Duke's going to want to be a part of that, but I think, as we talk about having a relationship, having partnership, we need to be able to work together on those things. So I think that's a great opportunity, that something that the city of Largo could do, is to help provide some of that charging. So as we start getting into that, I know we're just on the very cusp of putting some of those chargers in, but as we get further down the line in that project, just want to make sure we have that conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vice Mayor, and thank you for your comments early on. But yeah, I think the EV charging infrastructure is going to be very critical for the success of electric fleet. In fact, in Clearwater, the multimodal transit center, we are going to be including an EV charging infrastructure there as well, the en route charger.
Yes.
And I think the transfer facilities are probably the best locations to put these kind of EV infrastructure projects, because the bus waits there for 15-20 minutes for layover purposes, and that's what gives the time for the buses to sort of charge up for their next run. So yes, definitely be happy to work further with your staff on placement.
Fantastic. And then my last comment, I guess, is when we talk about BEEP and, the autonomous vehicles, it's been I think they've had a really good showing in St. Pete and Dunedin. I think there might have been an accident in Dunedin but, accidents happen. I mean, we're in a very dense population. So, I know the plan is to go to Clearwater after that. I think, when you look at Largo, we're not where we want to be as far as our density and some of the projects that we want it to really make a functioning great downtown. We're not there yet. We're really right on the cusp of that. But I still think, there are some opportunities here in Largo where we could have that type of test. Central Park across the street here is a great, I mean, it's a great place to that's a lot of traffic, a lot of people, a lot of different events going on. That's a great opportunity that we could put something like that in there. So again, I think my goal is to make sure that Largo and PSTA are working hand in hand. We might not have in the past, but not to say that we're at odds at any point, but I think, to be more symbiotic when we're working, just really have the same goals and work together moving forward. I think there's a lot of great projects that we could work together on in the very near future. So I just want, that was not really a question, more of a comment. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question about, you mentioned, I think there was 23 of the large average daily boardings in Largo. What is our maximum? Do you know if any of the maximum numbers for the city of Largo for average daily boardings?
I actually do not have that, but
Okay.
I'm happy to provide that.
Okay, I was just curious, because I see some bus bus locations in Largo that seem really, really busy to me. So I'm kind of curious what kind of numbers those are hitting and how that compares to some of the busy boarding numbers throughout the county. So if you could send that to us, I would appreciate it. I would like to thank PSTA. I know in recent months we've had some challenges with some bus stops that were kind of falling into disrepair. So I'd like to thank your staff for kind of getting together with our staff to working out how we can move forward with keeping those looking the way that they do now, which is they look great. So thank you for that. And one thing that I have always talked about, and this is maybe not a question for you as much as for Henry, but I've always talked about looking at the sidewalk networks that come in and out of high density areas of work and living, right? So I think the high density bus stops should and could be a really next step to look at, because those people don't live right next to the bus stop, and they walk there generally. So looking at any gaps in the sidewalks and filling those gaps as soon as we can, I think would be a really good thing. And with a map like this, where we know where the top 23 are in our city right away, it'd be pretty easy to look at, okay, well, how is that network of sidewalks around that? And where are the closest populations of people that might be using this bus stop? And how do we make sure that they're not having to walk on off the curb in the dirt or whatever to get there? And so I think that's an important thing for us, and I hope that we can work on that soon.
Absolutely.
So that wasn't a question. Good answer. But thank you for being here. Any other questions?
I just want to say that, first of all, my wife is a rider of PSTA and is takes a bus just about every day, and good old Route 65, keep it going. And I was down in St. Pete just last week, or was it earlier? No, it was last week when when PSTA surprised the 1 million Flamingo rider with a lot of fanfare and such, and it's really great to see these programs, taking off, and anything that we can do to encourage, ridership and the use of this type of transit, because it is very important to the area. I have a question. It's very unfair, but can you give me an idea of the price range, the cost range for actually installing a shelter?
Yeah, so certainly the shelter by itself costs between $7,500, depending on the size of the shelter.
Mhm.
And we have different sizes of shelters.
Yeah,
4 by
that's
8
the
is
range,
our
right.
standard
Yeah.
shelter, but it's about $7,500 just for the shelter. And for the pad, the concrete pad where it sits on, that's about $10,000, depending on where that pad is located. But it averages about $10,000 for that 10 by 15 pad that I mentioned.
So the average would be, if we were taking like a mean or an average, would be about 17,500
Yes.
for shelter.
Yeah, $18,000.
All right, thanks.
Can I kind of add to that? So when, you had talked about, well, right here in some of the shelter match programs and some of those lower ridership areas that might not necessarily be on the top tier for the PSTA's goal, but to the mayor's point and to Commissioner Gerard's point, some of those areas that we could probably put something there. It'd be nice to have something there because you've got 10, 20 people riding it in a day. Are we at right now, or is the city of Largo doing anything with PSTA when it comes to that? And if not, what do we need to do to start being a partner and moving forward with that?
Vice Mayor, I know we've just initiated some discussions with your staff on identifying certain locations, some priority stops. So we're still having those discussions to see what locations could be best for us to do similar type of a shelter match program. And to the mayor's point about sidewalks, and that's one of the criteria that we're also
Yes.
looking at, where it makes sense for people to have access to those stops through the sidewalks. So yes, we are working with the city, and hopefully we'll have a plan pretty soon.
Okay, great. Henry, can we just kind of make sure that that's working through the process?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's also a good opportunity, even if there's sidewalks that are servicing the bus shelter to make sure they're in good repair also.
So one more thing, this is more for Commissioner Carroll's benefit. 300X actually goes from the city of Largo to the city of Tampa, although it's a Clearwater address. So the 300X on Ulmerton it's in Largo. I know it's a Clearwater address, but he would have gave me a hard time if I didn't point that out.
Thank you for being here. This is very informative information that I think a lot of people need to kind of start looking at. I'm kind of interested. I view Largo right now kind of a home community where people live and they kind of visit or go because it's affordable here and you can go to St. Pete or over to Tampa and stuff. I'd like to see how we can partner as a city and on our staff where we can get that information you have for the late night workers, getting back and forth, where we can get the information and maybe include in our city manager or report or our communications that we send out to our citizens about ways that they may not know or are looking for that late night, afraid that the buses are going to shut down deal. So I think getting the biggest part, like we've talked about, is educating people about stuff that is new, the Flamingo app and stuff. But also the TD ridership program is a great thing, I think, to help those who can't use a bus at this moment in time, helping them get around and just getting, like I said, the information to them. So anyway, our staff, we can work with you to get that information out to our residents, I think would be great. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for the information.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow night, probably?
Yes, you will.
Next, we're going to have some information for the new city hall design.
Go to the video. Go upstairs.
I don't know.
Well, start here. Flashlight. You're gonna stick around.
Little speakers.
That's cool, man. Little Bluetooth.
A good travel speaker, like for the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Over the last several months, the City Hall project management team, as well as John Curran and his team at ASD Sky, have been finishing the design development phase for the new City Hall complex. So with design development coming to completion, we're here today to show you the latest renderings of the complex as well as a video. So today's goal is to have a discussion about design aspects of the building and specifically of the commission chambers, which I'm sure you are very interested. So with that, John, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate it. Great to be here. Again, my name is John Curran with ASD Sky. As Maggie indicated, we've been spending a lot of time the past few months really pulling the design together, and we're about to jump into the detail stages of the project. I remember the last time I was here, I shared with you about 40 slides and realized that probably the best thing to do to really give you a good sense of what we're trying to accomplish is just provide you a video. So the next thing we're going to do is just simply take you on a journey for about 4 minutes. Let's just hope the technology works first. Go Control Alt. Alright, so this is just about a 4-minute video that gives you a sense. We're going to go like 2 minutes on the outside. A lot of these images you've seen before, but it gives you a good sense. This perspective obviously is along West Bay Drive. You see the retail, you see the 5-story City Hall building, the canopy that connects the City Hall building with the garage. You start to move up in the air a little bit and you get a good sense of the public plaza right down the center here. This is a very important space between the garage and City Hall. Now we're on the west corner on Fifth. Again, you see the sort of green screen on the garage. You see that corner, the retail wrapping on Fifth. Again, continued retail and commercial space on West Bay. A large open space to really sort of make this a welcoming area. That special commercial zone that we've talked about, where there's a second floor terrace on the garage. You can see that just to your left. From West Bay looking in, sort of a bird's eye view. See those portal entries into both City Hall and that retail space. That canopy that takes you see we're going underneath now, to the right, City Hall. This is a water feature that actually gets its water from a water harvesting system. But the water moves towards that amphitheater that's towards the back. The amphitheater becomes a place for just contemplation. There's a stage for public events. That stage is strategically set so that it sort of addresses this parking lot you see here on the north side, as well as the plaza. So when there's no service going on in the building, you can actually use this parking area for other events. I mentioned this canopy. This is that connection from the garage. This is really going to be that entry for most people as you come into the lobby space. You see the living wall on the left. This gives you a good sense of that lobby space. The materials, terrazzo floor, wood ceiling. You see that living wall. You see the area here. This is sort of the check-in point. It's sort of a security checkpoint. We're moving towards these turnstiles that take you into the gallery on the ground floor. This is actually the chamber. All those doors you see on the left. Now we're inside the chamber. This is basically where the dais is. See how that works? We're pulling back and coming closer. You start to see that space. Similar setup to what you have now, but just much more bright and airy. This is when the whole room is open, looking back towards that area of the plaza and the idea of opening that up. I mentioned green corridor before, this idea that there's a center sort of spine in the building. It becomes that social space where all the conference rooms are. So we're taking you through a quick little journey into that corridor. Every level has a sort of a break room cafe for staff. This is just one on level 5. So it sets up a sort of a collaboration space. You see these booths. On level 5, we're going to do something a little different, so it just sort of mixes up the color. Typical workstations in the office floors. Idea of doing our best to maximize daylight throughout the entire facility. Coming to the mayor's and city manager's office off of the green corridor. And this is basically that lounge inside the mayor's office. This looks back as you're sort of moving towards the west. And then just a step outside onto the terrace. Terrace can be used by any visitor that comes to that office, the staff. Typical terrace on the east side of the building. This is the 5th floor lounge. That's actually an operable wall, that glass wall, so it can be opened up for a completely different and larger event. And then we're just pulling back outside. Those materials that we've talked about previously are consistent and still in the project and doing its job quite well. The screening system on the south, you see the canopy up on top with the solar panels, precast concrete elements you see here. Moving back towards the 4th Street, West Bay corner. And that sort of summarizes where we're at, what we're doing. All right. Now I guess I'll just get rid of this. Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so that was a quick way to give you a good sense of what we're trying to accomplish, and just a couple of things of areas we want to talk about today. So this is the ground floor plan. So The lobby space that we were in is here. The checkpoint, security checkpoint that you saw is here. You come through these turnstiles and come into that gallery. This is the chamber area you see. It's divisible into actually 5 rooms. The dais area is one of the rooms. That's permanent. That dais doesn't move. But the 4 other rooms that are here can be set up in many different ways. The workshop, like community room that we're in here right now, could actually be 2 rooms. It could be set up in many different configurations. There would likely be commissioner events that typically are set up with these 2 rooms. Some might just be 3, as you see here. We'll get closer shortly here. You see the retail space. You see sort of the back of house behind the chamber. I just wanted to give you a sense of this particular floor plan. So as we move closer to the chamber, again, there's the dais. This is what we'll call the bullpen, if you will, for the assistant city manager and the clerk. Typical presentation desk, podium, these are all movable. There's a spot for a police officer here built into this wall, which we're designing really as a photo op. Again, remember that what you're seeing, that the seat configurations can be arranged in many different ways. Whether there's actually 40 seats or 30 seats for a commission meeting, that can be determined later. But the idea that this area could easily be set up for those photo ops when presentations are made and you want to take those particular sort of award presentation photos. Great opportunity for city staff to sort of sit back here, work while they're waiting to make those presentations. So ideally, a commission meeting could probably take up these 3 rooms right here and really be in a comfortable environment, while these 2 other rooms could be used at the same time. Or you could end up having a configuration where you use the entire room as an event. Interesting conversation, with the building department today, talking about using the dais as a stage. That was an interesting conversation, but maybe, you never know, you could end up having a public event where this is used in such a unique way for a city commission. So currently, this is sort of giving you a close-up or a relatively close-up view of what we're trying to accomplish here inside the chamber, where you see the dais. The dais is elevated about 6 inches. You see the bullpen here. We're using simple walnut woods to sort of give it a little bit of a softer feel. And then the backdrop here, we're still exploring different materials in the back, but we're trying to accomplish that with some acoustic quality, so there's a softening of the sound inside the room. As we move towards the back, you start to see the furniture is not chosen yet. We're just sort of placing those as placeholders so you get a sense of how this room starts to work. There are TVs in the ceiling, TVs on the walls. So there's opportunities for all sorts of different locations for people to really understand what's going on, as well as for the commission to actually see the presentations right in front of them as opposed to looking at your computers. And that happens directly in the ceiling up above. So you start to push back. The way we do that is with these types of TVs that are actually, they're folding. They come from the ceiling. So in certain events, you might just take the TV and put it back into the ceiling. But during commission events, these TVs come down, and wherever you're at, whether it's you're seeing them on the wall or you're seeing them up in the ceiling, you'll actually be able to see those presentations. And again, for your perspective, you have the same types of televisions up high as well in front of you. So when you're sitting at the dais, again, you can look at the audience and actually see the presentation right above you. This is a view of the gallery. So we're setting, again, these, one of the things we've started to create in the architecture is sort of this language of portals. You started to get a view and glimpse bringing these portal languages inside the building into the green corridor. So we've created these little zones where people can actually sit while they're waiting to go into a conference room. And they become these little sort of outlined areas of entry or even just sort of sitting. We're doing the same thing with the entries into the commission chamber. So you just see a very simple wall here. This is really a gallery where each room is identified with this very simple wood walnut type approach. This is a display which gives you a sense of every event that's happening within this area. And the blank walls that you see are really set up as gallery walls. The idea of interchanging art, so they would be hung along this area here. So we're not showing any art at the moment, but the city has the opportunity to literally create a community art experience in this whole zone through here. And then I think lastly, just wanted to give you a sense of that sort of the materials that we're utilizing inside the mayor's and city manager's office. So this is really set up as an area where visitors will come. They would likely wait in this area before they would meet with somebody. But you start to see the components and the materials that we're using. This is a very simple carpet here, a terrazzo floor. The portals that I mentioned, this idea that the entry sequences, whether it's into a suite or it's actually into the building itself, just very simple use of this black metal panel that frames those entries. The material qualities that we're using, you'll see a lot of black painted steel and black painted aluminum. We're trying to create this very sustainable, industrial sort of corporate feels. The use of wood and these simple materials really give it, we think, a very distinct and interesting look, I guess, if that's the best way to put it. Yeah. So I think that really concludes the presentation. I tried to make it short and sweet. And if you wanted to talk about any of these details, we'd be more than happy to.
Thank you. Any questions?
Quickly, the living wall at one point was going to go up all 5 stories, but I understand it's not now. How high, is this just in the lobby area?
Well, at the moment, what we're doing is it's finding its way towards the top, but we started to strip away the living wall because, quite honestly, maintenance.
Right.
So I mentioned these portals, so I don't have a plan to share with you what's happening there, but we added these areas of floor. So like from that corridor, the green corridor, there's zones where you can actually, maybe it's about 10 feet wide, where the floor actually comes and connects to the wall, right? So on the 4th floor, we introduced a portal right outside one of the conference rooms. On the 5th floor, we did the same thing. So what'll happen is those portals that connect the wall are opportunities to actually maintain the living wall itself. So instead of having some service provider take care of the wall by hanging over that area, they can literally do it from the floor itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so
yes.
how many stories?
It'll go up all 5 floors.
Okay.
The majority of the living wall really happens in the lobby and into the 3rd floor, and then it starts to peel away as it goes up.
And one other question, you mentioned that the portals would have like black painted steel or black painted aluminum. Is that actually painted or is that powder coated?
It's powder coated.
All right, thanks.
You know, it's off of what Commissioner Gerard was just inquiring about, and really it's not so much for you. By the way, I love what you've done here. Some of the things we've talked about, I now see in the video, and great job. But it occurs to me, seeing this beautiful building, all the glass and all the other features, landscaping and so forth, this question is for him. We need to make sure, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but we need to make sure we have adequate funding set aside for maintenance so this building doesn't look, well used in a year or so. If we're going to do a lot of community events and gathering and all these other things, I want to make sure we have money for that. But
Yes.
I absolutely love what you've done.
Especially the exterior and the amphitheater area and all that.
And we are having those discussions, and we recognize, like the living wall's an example. We're looking now at a company that's actually located here in Florida, so we're looking at the contracting for the maintenance for that, whatever we ultimately decide on. There's other issues where we are going to have to, have some additional staffing, particularly if we have a lot more events in this building. Got to keep the garage clean. So this is going to be a really hub of community activity, so we need to keep it in good condition.
So I think we need to be ready for that honest conversation
Yes.
about what best possible.
Yes.
Any questions?
Yeah, real quick. First of all, I'm a huge fan of everything that I'm seeing so far. It looks great. The chambers look great. The mayor, city manager's office is just fantastic all around. So my main thing, everybody here is well aware, is sustainability, environmental. And I know we talked about the green wall. We talked about the water feature that's kind of filtered through using rainwater, and those are fantastic. The solar obviously is a great feature. I want to get into the sustainability of the building in some type of a storm situation, and B, kind of go into some more of what the plans are. Obviously, we're not really down the we probably should have a good idea of what kind of environmental friendly features that we're going to have in this building. We had talked at the very beginning of this about LEED certification and some other things. I don't know if we're there or if we're planning on going there, but
We are.
kind of talk about some of those things for me, please.
Sure. So at the moment, we are on the cusp of actually being a platinum facility.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so, and I think I'm every day getting more and more confident that we're actually going to be there. I never like to say we will be there because it still has to go through a process of approval with the U.S. Green Building Council, but we are literally right there. So, so there's a couple of mechanisms that will get us over that plateau, and I know we can actually do them. So, no question it'll be gold certified for sure, but I think we're still trying to reach platinum, which would be a tremendous story. So all the things that we've talked about, daylight harvesting, so the building is going to be infused with as much daylight as possible, and how we control the lighting in the building is going to be very critical. The living wall is just one small component that just enhances the activity in terms of the sustainability. It's a display of I think, the city's commitment to sustainability. We're still doing geothermal. We're looking at a way to actually utilize reclaimed water, which would actually save the city some money because we wouldn't have to actually have the wells pumping the water constantly. We'd actually use the reclaimed water for that system. And the interesting thing that could happen, and I can't say just at the moment out of the numbers, but what that may do for us is actually increase the amount of efficiency the solar panels are providing. So you remember I mentioned the solar array that we're doing, 37,000 square feet, provides about 30% of the energy in the building. Once we get rid of the geothermal pumps, which don't have to run 24/7 anymore, that efficiency will go up. We might be as high as 50%, but I'm not certain just yet. But the point of that is all of a sudden the efficiency gives us even a potential additional points from a LEED certification standpoint, but it makes that array that much more worthwhile in terms of the solar activity. We're still doing water harvesting. So the interesting thing with the reclaimed water is the reclaimed water will help us with the geothermal loop for the cooling system, but it also is sort of the backup plan when the water harvesting tanks go empty if there's a drought or anything like that. So we always have that ability to tap into those systems. But that water harvesting system will provide all the water for the irrigation. The water for the water feature is not that much, but it's there to supply it. So it's not something that we're conserving water. And then it's providing the gray water for the water closets as well. So that's an incredibly efficient story. And then just from a performance standpoint, from the glass standpoint, whether it has a screen on it or it doesn't have a screen on it, say on the north side, all the glazing is high performance glazing. We're designing the building as a risk 4 category, which means structurally this building will withstand 157 mile an hour winds. Glass wise, it's high missile impact up to 3, and then 4 and 5 are actually low missile impact. So it is a fortress in some respects, even though it's majority of it is glass. We even talked to some of the police officer, I forget his name, but as we were talking through some of the issues and the concerns of should we have bulletproof glass here on the chamber where we're proposing lots of glass. And even the police officer recognized that there's an opportunity with the high missile impact glazing that alone would give you the protection you need, right? So it really does provide that safety factor as well. And then all of the green elements, besides the living wall inside the building, the fact that we're trying to bring greenery to the garage as well, just so that it's a bit softer to the neighborhood. It's a lot easier for all of us to breathe with a lot of greenery as opposed to the cars itself. The amount of electric charging stations that we're placing in the project, significant. So I think the story alone of sustainability and resiliency for this project is phenomenal. It really is. And that's what I think is going to set this project apart completely.
And yeah, I mean, I know we've been having those conversations all along, and I just wanted to make sure that people outside of this room are well aware of that, because we've heard some people already commenting on the new city hall, and none of this is going to satisfy some of that, but I just want to make sure that all of the things that you guys have been working on for the last 2 years is up. And everybody's aware of what's going on. And thank you because I know a lot of those comments have come from us and staff and taking all that into consideration when you're putting this together. So I'm very excited. And the LEED, standards I wasn't aware of that until just now, so that's fantastic.
I enjoyed the video. As someone who's more of a visual person, that helped out a lot to wrap my head around a few things. I've always been a big push of this building, and y'all have done a great job with it being mixed use and trying to make this a community building where it's not just the city government. It's where you can come eat, enjoy, have entertainment, used for different businesses or organizations. So I think with the chamber, how you have set it up, I've said that I think that would be a great opportunity for us and organizations to look at, to draw them to Largo, to our downtown, to see what's here, and to grow off that. I really enjoy the gallery. I'm a big person. I want to see art in Largo. So I really like that area right there where we can do art. These are nice photos on our walls that we currently have for more of office space. But I'd like that to be more of a community-driven art gallery where we can rotate it, maybe bring different artists, local artists, so we can push our community and drive people to want to come here. So I think including that walkway and that gallery, I think will help inspire artists to want to come to our downtown and make it a place, a destination. So I really do enjoy that, and thank you for including that area.
And I think it's important too with the commission chambers being able to be used for events and activities, that people will be able to see that art when they're walking into the chambers, and then the glassed area will be able to use the chambers both inside and outside. So if there's ever a time where we maybe have an event inside and a concert outside, people will be able to flow back and forth between both of those locations. So it really gives us a lot of options for this space.
Go ahead. Please.
No, you go ahead.
No, please.
Okay, so just out of left field, and of course we're all aware of the raft of storms that we've been seeing traveling up the Gulf, through the Gulf, across the central U.S. and up into New York and all that. Has there been consideration of flood protection for the first floor in case we get hit by something that drops 14 inches of rain in an hour? Downtown is relatively high, but street flooding from intense rain, can happen all the time. So,
At the moment, we have not considered that because of the elevation. And
Right.
we feel that because of that elevation, the building and the complex will be protected for the most part. I mean, I can't predict what'll happen, but I think
I'm not as concerned about storm surges as I am,
just flood. yeah.
intense rainfall, which we're seeing more and more often.
I'll tell you, as somebody that lives and works in downtown, and we have 4 inches in a couple hours sometimes, and there's rarely standing water on any of those roadways because everything everything goes away and the downtown or the stormwater system really works, even with a collapsed pipe that we have to fix. Really works.
172 feet of collapse.
Really works very well. So I think it's got a lot of, I mean, it's 60 feet above sea level, and 20th is pretty low. So it's a half mile of going downhill. So I haven't seen any surface water.
So we're pretty confident, I guess.
Yes.
And we'll be okay.
I had a
Maybe
question.
We'll turn it into a shelter during the storm.
I'm going to jump in front of Commissioner Carroll and ask a question, because I know. But I have a question. I know we're super excited about the city staff areas and the areas that were in the video, but I'd like to know a little bit more about the retail spaces. About how many spaces do you think they're going to be? What type of businesses are we going to target? How? And this is maybe more for Maggie and Henry, but how do we anticipate working out those rental agreements and so for the success of the businesses and also so that we're happy with what's there and they're happy with being there.
We are currently evaluating proposals that we've received from commercial leasing firms.
Okay, so various proposals and what type of space? I know roughly the numbers, but what type of space? How many spaces are we talking about?
So it is slightly flexible. You can see here in the retail portion on the first floor of City Hall, we anticipate 2 or 3 in that space, but it is flexible, and I think we're really waiting on getting a leasing firm on board so they can help us do an analysis of what type of retail we should be focusing on. What we've heard so far from the proposals is restaurants, some small businesses, potentially like a Quickie Mart type convenience store type store that would bring people in, but we're not quite there yet. We have a meeting set up actually on Thursday, so we'll be there soon, and we'll be able to bring that to you in the future.
And is there? It looks like a solid wall from the lobby into that retail space. Is that a definite, or is there a possibility for an opening where that hand is going in circles?
We've actually talked about
That's
a
where
punch
I'm
through
going.
potentially for a coffee shop.
Right.
That would be absolutely wonderful. So patrons can go in and staff and residents can go and get their,
Staff wouldn't have to leave the building to.
right, to get their coffee.
I mean, as Maggie indicated, like this is about 4,800 square feet of retail space. So ideally, this works great for 2. It could be 1, ultimately, but it all depends on who you're drawing. Great coffee shop right here. This could be just a general business, for that matter. And then over in the garage, there's about 13,000 to 14,000 square feet there. I mean, just thinking in my head, and every time I've looked at it, there's 1, 2, 3. I would say ideal for 3 large retailers, possibly a 4th, which might sort of turn the corner on 5th. But the way they're set up, there's the one on the corner that I've been calling sort of the special retail. Ideally, that's one, where that should be sold or at least try to lease out as a food and beverage type place. And then there is a good 6,000 square feet towards the back. I've always thought that lends itself well for food and beverage as well. I mean, you start thinking to yourself, if you have all food and beverage, is it going to be competition? I think it's just going to be a destination,
Yeah,
right? So if you had a brewery in the back, restaurant in the front, and then maybe the corners become more like sort of local businesses, that could be just extraordinary. So, I mean, what we just described, you probably, I'd say the most 6, could be as small as 4. I mean, yeah, 4.
But this is going to be initially, that's all unfinished space so that it can be customized to what firms want to come in. So even in this area, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we wouldn't even put a floor in
That's correct.
right away. So particularly for a food and beverage operation, they have a lot of plumbing and electrical needs, and you don't want to put that in and, You want to put that in after the floor, not before.
So what you're looking at, see this here, this actually came straight from our plans. That's the edge of the concrete, so this would be all soil inside here.
Can I ask that we give special consideration to a gelato shop? Can I just ask that? All right.
We're also making provisions for cooking, so that it literally gives the city the flexibility to provide all food and beverage. So there's grease traps in both City Hall and in the garage, and the idea of, grease exhaust as well. Yeah, so.
And we'll also have you can see the catering kitchen too that's off of the chambers behind the waiting area. So that'll lend to people who are hoping for more events and rental space in the chambers itself, because it'll already be set up with that catering kitchen.
I have a question, Mike. I'm sure there are thousands of people that live in Largo, who live in Largo, or at home watching this presentation right now. But if not, I'm assuming that, Maggie, you are the contact person should a community group, a neighborhood group, whatever, want to know more information when the time is appropriate, and whether or not John is with it, I'm not sure.
Yes, and we're also working with communications and engagement. They've been doing some outreach in the downtown already with the Complete Streets project, as well as City Hall. So we've, in the last couple of weeks, had very positive feedback from our downtown partners, which is wonderful.
Yeah,
So we've already started that too.
Myself, I've had positive feedback also, but anytime something appears in a newspaper or there's a story about this, it generates questions, and I would be inclined to direct them to you. And then after the fact, or along the way, with all the wonderful sustainability features in this building, I'm assuming there'll be someone on city staff, as part of their duties would be to perhaps do tours or give information about all the cost-saving benefits and the sustainability features of this building, so that we, post-construction, can make people feel good about this project that they just paid for. And I think they will if we market it that way.
And we've already talked about that too, and making sure that we're intentional with signage around the building, outside of the building, so when people walk around, they can see and feel the sustainability. But I love the tour idea. That's a great idea.
I'm just thinking that sometimes it's in other organizations, sometimes it's even a volunteer, that knows a lot about the project, that can, if you want to bring a kids group through or something to see, these features. But we should have somebody, so it's not, haphazard like that.
Thank you, it's exciting.
Great.
Hope to see you soon.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Putting that video up on the city website would be a good idea.
Next, we'll have a report from our homeless task team.
I think after, sorry.
That's okay.
We're having our own little conversation.
Do you think, and I just mentioned it offhand, do you think it's too soon to put that video up on the city website, or would it be appropriate to do it now, or should we wait?
We've been updating the City Hall website on the new City Hall portion of our website, so I think, it's more than ready to go up, and we can certainly do that.
Because that's very impressive. It give people just a great idea, a great look at what it's going to be. Yeah, and then maybe a little language about the leads.
Well, John's narration throughout the whole thing, I think, would be perfect.
I'll just ask
I was waiting
John.
for music, though. I was waiting for a little music under,
I'll just ask John to re-narrate over it, and then we can post that.
And a little music, just a little music for drama.
Talking about some music, just haven't had a chance to do that.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe something from 2001 Space Odyssey.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Sean Lopez. I'm a management analyst with the Office of Performance and Budget and one of the members of the Homeless Task Team. Together, I also have with me Officer Matthew Steiner, our Homeless Street Outreach Officer, and Daniela Hernandez, our Largo PD Crime Analyst. I'll be joined by some others later on, and I'll introduce them when we get to those sections here. So I wanted to start off just with a background slide. So this is a slide from the last time we met. We were asked to come back after about a year of the homeless street outreach team being active in the city to provide some additional updates on service calls and data updates and some additional community and local trends. So we're back to provide those updates. But just as a quick background, so the Homeless Task Team was started after the Homeless Policy Work Group, which is made up of members of the city's executive leadership team, identified a need for some frontline perspectives to be able to look for solutions to helping improve homelessness in the city. So we have there our mission statement and just a couple key facts about the team. So looking at what we're going to cover today, Officer Steiner is going to cover some service call data updates and look at some first-year outcomes and some success stories that he's had in the community. Danielle and I are going to look at some of the homeless data that we have for updates from the previous time that we met last December. And then Errol Woodard, our housing manager, is going to join me and talk about some key takeaways and local and countywide trends that we're identifying, and then we're going to talk about what's next. So with that, I will hand it over to Officer Steiner to go over his first-year outcomes.
So this is the same chart that we presented to you guys initially, and this is just the updated version of it. I can go through each one of them and explain what they mean. So the homeless referrals for other officers, that's if I get an email or an FIR from another officer reaching out to me because they came across somebody that needed some services of some sort. So they'd either send me an email or do an FIR for that. The homeless contact FIRs is when I reach out to an individual that's experiencing street homelessness, and that would be people that do not want services or want to think about services at a later time. So I document that in a field contact and label as a homeless referral. And there were 151 of those with 215 subjects. The homeless outreach reports, those are anytime I provide some sort of referral to any services in the community or detox program. So that was 295 actual reports, and there were 420 individuals in those reports. The detox programs, I referred 21 people to different detox programs throughout the community. The main one was Axe Keystone up in Tarpon. The referrals to Pinellas Hope, I had 334 referrals to Pinellas Hope. 86 actually went. 25 were rehoused or successfully discharged from the program, and 23 were still there. The referrals to Safe Harbor, I had 18, so not many referrals to Safe Harbor. I had a lot of individuals that had been there or didn't want to go back or were trespassed, or there's multiple different reasons for that. The referrals to St. Vincent de Paul and VA, there's 2, halfway housing 3. Those are usually within Largo. The halfway houses are in Largo. The other referrals, there could be anything from clothing to shoes to food, and we had 26 people for that. And then we had 66 trespass warnings, so the total was 982.
And to give some context to that last number there, 982. The last time we met, we had 394 contacts up until November. So in that period of time, from December to June, which we have here, there were 588 additional contacts that Officer Steiner's made. Any questions on this slide? Okay. You want to go ahead?
A couple success stories. This was a person that was chronically homeless. I dealt with on numerous occasions. He said he wanted to go to shelters multiple times, but never really took the initiative to actually do it or reach out to me. Eventually, he did end up calling us, and we did hook him up with the Salvation Army shelter and got him connected to services. So it just shows that you have to reach out to people on numerous occasions sometimes for them to actually accept services. This was, I think we got a call from another officer about a mother and a son that were living in a car. They were in the Walmart parking lot at Missouri and Rosary. We made contact with them. They got kicked out of a family member's home, so they weren't able to go back there, so they had nobody else to assist them with getting into housing or anywhere stable. So we ended up getting them hooked up with, it was Directions for Living that put them into the temporary hotel and eventually hope, I don't know what the total outcome was if she got into permanent housing, but I'm assuming she did. I think it says she does actually, so she did get it. And then we got her a tank of gas and some stuff for the kids and stuff. This was, I made contact with this person in Largo Central Park. They had admitted to having multiple substance abuse issues. They wanted to get help. We tried to get them into Keystone once. They had no openings at that time, so we had to keep reaching out to them, maintain contact with them until we were able to secure a bed there for them, and we did get them into that rehab. And they were super grateful for us to keep that connection with them to get them into that detox facility. And at the bottom there was 19 calls for service for that person since 2020 started. This one is actually still ongoing now. I had made contact with this guy when I first started the homeless outreach position. I'd been dealing with him for nonstop. He'd been arrested multiple times. He's overdosed on numerous occasions. Every time I saw him, his physical appearance, mental stability was, everything was just deteriorating with him. So I ended up doing a Hal Marchman Act through the courthouse to get him into some rehab facility. He did go into there, then he got out and he got arrested. So I did the second portion of the Hal Marchman Act, and he's still in jail now. He was doing well so this hasn't been updated. He was doing well when we went to visit him at the detox facility. I had a conversation with him. He looked great. Everything was going well. He got out. He ended up getting arrested. So I did the second portion of the Marchman Act, and I'm still waiting for him to get out of jail to get him back into a detox facility.
So I think looking at these success stories and seeing the increase in contacts that Officer Steiner is making, that increase from those first 5 months, looking at the original count here of let me pull up that number, it was 394, and then seeing the new number here, 982. As Officer Steiner continues to build rapport in the community and have those successful outcomes. The key thing there is multiple contacts to be able to get people connected with services. Okay, looking at a heat map here. So at the last meeting, we provided a heat map with the last set of data we have. So now we have an updated heat map, essentially showing that the hot spots that we had indicated from the last meeting are very similar to the most recent data. Down along Missouri Road there, and the Clearwater Largo area in downtown Largo, east-west along East Bay, and then at the major intersections along Ulmerton are really where a lot of the hot spots of calls for service from Largo Dispatch are occurring. So here is the updated numbers for the police dispatch for the 1 year of service since street outreach has been online. The numbers are falling in about average of what we were seeing before with the prior year's data from June 2020 to June 2021. 3,595 calls for service. The prior year annual averages ranging from 2,991 on a low to 3,664, averaging about 9 to 10 calls per day into Largo's dispatch. And Danielle Hernandez is going to talk a bit about the high utilizer information that we have here.
So with our calls, we're able to actually tag a call as 2H if it involves a homeless person or the name gets tagged 2H. So looking at that, I'm able to pull anyone that has multiple calls throughout the year to see them how much they utilize our services. With this, we looked at anyone that had more than 5 2H stamps for the time frame. So from June of 2019 to June 2020, we only had 51. This is when we started doing the 2H tracking, so we didn't have a full year of that yet, and it was still being newly implemented. And in that time frame, there was no high utilizer that had more than 2 calls. In comparison to June 2020 to June 2021, we had almost 2,500 2H stamps. high utilizers made up 35% of those stamps, so that's anybody with more than 5 calls. The most calls we had were 17 for one individual, but those with 2 to 4 calls also made up almost 40%. So I think the main takeaway is that the high utilizers from the 1920 year to 2021, they were not the same. We can't make definitive conclusions now. We need to keep tracking because 2019 is when we started with the 2H stamps, but it seems that our high utilizers, they're not staying the same year to year.
Yeah, so this section here of the 2H data, we're going to continue to kind of analyze this as we get additional years of data. But I think one key takeaway here, looking at the 2H stamp, is those proportions of the total call volume in the last year that make up the 2H stamp. So those high utilizers of 5 or more calls, roughly, that 39%, and then those that make up 2 to 4 calls, 39%. So as we continue to look for more data, we can see, how many of those people are recurring year to year, how many of that population would be considered transient, where they're in the area, and then they're out of the area, then they're not picked up in later trends. So we'll continue to analyze this data, and Danielle is able to work with Officer Steiner with monthly reports about high utilizers to be able to help track them in the community, to try and connect them with services. So yes, so key takeaways here. The chronic homeless are contacting street outreach as Officer Steiner continues to build that rapport in the community. He's making a lot of contacts with members, almost 1,000 in the first year. But limited access to shelters, substance rehab facilities, and resources. Officer Steiner, if you want to talk about that, about how that presents a challenge, where once you make these contacts, the challenge of being able to connect them with resources.
Yeah, right now it's a very big challenge. Pretty much every shelter that I know of is half capacity, and if the one of the best shelters that I know of, Pinellas Hope, now there's stipulations on there. If you've been to jail within the past 2 months, you can't go there. If you've been to Safe Harbor within the past 3 months, you can't go there. So there's just a lot of issues that are going on because of COVID issues, with Safe Harbor having some positive COVID cases there. So other places aren't accepting people who've been at Safe Harbor. And also my go-to detox facility, their actual detox portion has shut down now. So I had to think outside the box and find different substance abuse places that I could go to. I know PAR was in the city, but we've never had any success getting people into PAR, so I actually went there and met with the director of PAR, and she's like, well, the access place that does our intakes will say there's no space. She's like, reach out to me if you have somebody that needs to go there personally. So I'm just trying to build more relationships with more local detox facilities, and not just using the phone, because those could get lost in translation. So but yeah, there are a lot of issues with COVID and half capacity places and stuff like that right now, so it's pretty tough, especially with family shelters are all full too. So.
Okay, so for the next section here, I'm going to ask Errol Woodard to join us here. So Officer Steiner and Danielle, they'll remain in the audience for any questions. Errol, if you wouldn't mind joining me. All right, and Errol Woodard, our housing manager, is going to talk about our local trends and community trends.
Definitely see this as a team effort. We've got a lot of hands in the pot for the presentation tonight. So I serve on the Homeless Leadership Alliance Funders Council. We've also had monthly meetings with the big jurisdictions and most of the funding agencies throughout the county, starting at the beginning of the pandemic. So we still meet and touch base on what trends are going on in the community, what funding sources are available, and just kind of keep those doors open. That group actually did publish, with the help of HLA, a statement of need for addressing homelessness, so I'm happy to provide a copy of that to you all as well. It's got some really good kind of up-to-date data on what's going on in the community. But one of the trends that our homeless task team brought forth was Community Standards was seeing an increase in people sleeping by the day labor facilities. And so these are folks, a lot of times you have to get there in line first thing to get those jobs when the doors open. And so that kind of indicates a lack of transportation to, if they're staying in a shelter, they can't get there, or maybe the shelters with the capacity decrease right now don't have a better option to stay. So we saw this as, a potential for some innovative ideas, I guess, to maybe see if there is a better way to connect those shelters with some of these day labor places so that they could have transport. In our last Safe Harbor Task Team meeting, actually that came up, and it turns out one of the day labor places does have a van service that goes to 4:30 every morning to Safe Harbor, picks folks up and brings them to work. So that's something we could see as, tackling it a different way instead of just people, why are they sleeping in bushes? There's a reason they want to work. They just need to be close to that job access. So, as Officer Steiner mentioned, the shelter capacity, we just started getting back up to almost full capacity with Safe Harbor and Pinellas Hope, and then the variants clamped down on that again. Our family shelters have continued to be at full capacity throughout the pandemic, as well as the domestic violence shelters. But so HLA is seeing a tremendous increase in calls for shelters. 211 data on their dashboard. We've tracked those trends in our jurisdictions group meetings. Every time we look at that dashboard, we look at 6 months of data and then the last 30 days of calls. And we've seen a shift from looking for affordable, well, first it was rent assistance last year. Now that's directed to the county, so less are calling 211, but then it was looking for affordable housing, and now the higher percentage in the last 30 days has moved toward looking toward shelters. And overwhelmingly, I think it's almost, it's over 70% of those calls are coming from females as well. So that's a big trend we're seeing when they can't find housing and those shelter spaces are at full capacity. Yes.
Did you say 70% of those calls are from females? Did I hear you correctly?
The 211, yes. Yep, you can drill down to the data for male, female, veteran, non-veteran, and so forth, and it also gives by age group. So another trend that we've seen too over time, and I'm not sure as much on the shelter age level, but on looking for housing, there's kind of that young workforce group, but also the seniors are looking for affordable housing right now too. Those are the big areas. Officer Steiner touched on the closure of that substance abuse facility. So that is a substantial hit when you're trying to get someone, I know our mental health team has the same problem. We get someone that's ready to make a change in their life, and then they have to wait 3 months to get into a place. So that's definitely a big barrier that we're continuing to see. Pinellas County is working on a mental health action plan. It actually started development before the pandemic. And so they're looking at different mechanisms for coordinated entry into mental health services. I think they're also looking at adding some of those types of services at Bayside Clinic so that there are some accessible services, not just physical health services, but mental health and substance abuse assistance as well. So, thanks. So the one of the big trends, that always touches on all of us too, and it sounds like our officers are seeing it out in the community too, is that there has been a growing number of families with children needing shelter. Actually, I think, on this slide I have it. So this data below here is from the Homeless Management Information System. That's the coordinated entry system for the county. And so this is countywide data on there's 670 individuals awaiting to get in rapid rehousing, which means they need some assistance finding housing and maybe some rent deposit, a little bit of case management, and they'll be on their way. 205 individuals waiting for permanent supportive housing, which need that longer term substantial case management support. And then there's 168 families with children awaiting rapid rehousing and 7 families with children waiting for permanent supportive housing. And these numbers are, I combined them for this slide, but there's a large portion that are awaiting to get into these programs to be assigned to case managers, in addition to the ones that are in the program waiting for housing. Use of motels has been growing during the pandemic as a last resort to keep especially families from being on the street homeless during the pandemic. That's probably one of our tightest crunches right now, both funding-wise throughout the county and just finding space for families with children to keep them off the street right now. So what is next? So we have our Heart app that the staff have still been using, and we're going to continue that data collection through there. Those emails go to Officer Steiner directly when someone enters a spot, a location, or an individual into the app. And also our library liaison on our homeless task team is going to help us with doing a little video recording on our protocols, so it can be put on our intranet site for training for staff, as new staff come on protocols working with homeless individuals and encampments. Street outreach program is planned to continue for this next fiscal year. And then, I skipped ahead for the training videos. And then also the homeless task team, we have switched from meeting monthly to every other month at this point. We really keep a tight-knit communication. So, if someone from Community Standards finds an encampment, they're working with Officer Steiner. Definitely in housing, we're reaching out all the time to all three of the major POP team members, the mental health services, street outreach, and our senior service officer. So we all work very closely, and I think this task team method has definitely created that line of communication. So, another slide.
Well, with that, I'll actually hand it over to Mary Simonis and Cheryl Reed to talk about connections from homelessness and the recent commission retreat.
Good evening, everyone. So first, thank you to Officer Steiner and the rest of the homeless task team for their passion and dedication to addressing these needs in our community. It's important to note that we as an organization aren't just stopping there with these things that we talked about. So we would really be remiss if we didn't talk about all of the discussions that we had at our annual retreat in January and how that's informing the way this group works together and other future policy direction. So Cheryl Reed, our Community Development Director, and I are going to take a few minutes to link some of the content you heard today from the task team with the direction you gave us at the retreat and ensure that we're still headed in the right direction. So among the key takeaways from the City Commission retreat, we did reach consensus on that statement up there that preventing homelessness aligns with our strategic plan goals and our overall strategy for our community, and that preventing homelessness or acknowledging that homelessness should be rare, brief, and one time, which aligns with the Homeless Leadership Alliance's mission statement. So at the retreat, we covered the continuum of success. If you want to go to the next slide for me. You'll probably remember these areas that we covered related to how communities can engage in a framework of best practices to prevent and address homelessness issues. So we'll go over each of these strategy areas really quickly. And first, we'll cover the Commission's perception of our current investment in that category. We'll also cover some new or emerging factors that are affecting the continuum of success implementation here. And then finally, talk about some immediate and near-term needs the city's pursuing to address these emerging factors. Next slide, please. So in the crisis emergency response, that's largely what you heard about tonight. As you can see at the retreat, we celebrated our success about these programs and continue to see the positive impact we're making in the community. You can see here, based on the direction we got at the Commission, we all felt this was an area where we have a high level of investment, but certainly not too high, and did celebrate the successes that we're seeing. Some new factors that we talked about tonight, the crisis condition continues to increase in our community in terms of impacts from COVID-19. It's, other things that we're mitigating the impacts of this, including federal eviction moratorium and things like that are increasing the issues in our community. And then we heard about our limited shelter capacities, and also our nonprofit partners are overwhelmed with the amount of need in the community. So in the mid to near term, you heard Arrow talk about emergency housing services and that need for more flexible funding to address some of these issues, like motel room funding. And then we also need to somehow help the nonprofit partners increase their capacity to help not only with sheltering and housing navigation services. And then finally, we talked about some possible things that we could do to help the performance of our own team here. And, I think more midterm, we talked about adding a shift to deal with homelessness calls, knowing that homelessness does not occur just during regular business hours. And then also improving administrative support for all of the intervention programs to help improve the coordinated response and provide more of that case level worker type of services. Are there any questions on this slide before we move on? Okay, next slide, please. And regarding housing stability, we celebrated our existing commitments that we administer through our housing programs at the retreat. And then we also got the message from the City Commission that our investment level here is low or perhaps even too low, suggesting that we may need to focus on this as an area of investment in the future. Some new factors emerging here is the acknowledgement that new funding is going to be available for our nonprofit partners with programs like ARPA and other stimulus programs. But again, having to address that capacity issue to spend it is always something that we have to deal with. We've seen other partners and other programs in the community streamlining the process for rent and utility assistance to prevent foreclosure. So we heard early on during the pandemic that using these programs was cumbersome. So I know that the county and other areas have been working on that. And then we've also added funding within our budget for the city's Angel Fund and other, and of course, continuing the homeless outreach. Yes.
Can I, real quick, when we talk about housing stability, I think there's some other things that we can do, and this actually was something I was going to talk about at the end of the meeting, but this kind of falls right in line. So I think there's some other issues, some things that we can do to streamline some of the processes that we have in place. And Henry, you and I have talked about this briefly, and I believe the committee for SHIP is going to have the discussion later on, but while we're talking about it, I might as well just bring it up. So I think there's couple things we can do. One is permitting fees. I think there's some things that we can do around that. I think we can also work on our criteria for affordable housing designation. I know we worked on that in one specific location in the city. When it came to Habitat housing, I believe they're moving forward on that project. And then also there's some other, there was a new rezoning for affordable housing bill that was passed this last year. St. Pete has already taken action on that and passed an ordinance to allow that to happen. I think that's another issue we can do. And all of those together, first I would like to have a much more in-depth conversation about that. It's probably not the time to do that. I would make sure that I would definitely want the Commissioner Gerard, that committee, to speak about those things, and I can.
Affordable Housing Advisory.
Correct, thank you.
I just knew that one, so I thought.
No, yeah, so, and then lastly, those two things. I want to have a more in-depth conversation with this commission about those things. And again, Meredith, I apologize for interrupting, but I think this kind of falls right into the housing stability. Providing affordable housing in the city of Largo absolutely, I think, falls in line with that. So, again, more of a conversation that we can have later, but those three things I definitely want to talk about more in depth as we move forward.
That committee's meeting again tomorrow night. We'll be talking about many of those.
I'll make sure you have this information. You can talk away about it.
Sure. Cheryl, do you want to thank you? Those comments really align with really the rest of our presentation. I think you did it for me. So
hey,
we're done.
I'm the guy on the train. That's what I do.
But I will ask Cheryl to talk about some of those immediate actions that we are taking in this category that align with some of the things you just said. Yeah, you're welcome.
And you might cover this. Do we currently have programs for rent and utility assistance right now? Is that?
At the current time, Pinellas County government is administering those.
Correct.
And in early September, they did announce that they had streamlined their application procedures. They have, are continuing to promote something that is really important with this latest phase of federal stimulus funding, that both the tenant or the property owner, landlord, can be the applicant for that rental assistance.
Right.
So we're hoping that those changes will make it easier for both landlords as well as tenants to apply for that funding. We have taken several steps to make sure that we're sharing that information with the community, working through communications and engagement. We've also reached out to the landlords in the community to let them know that they now can also apply for that financial assistance to be reimbursed.
That assistance is available through, isn't it 2025, I want to say?
At least probably 2024.
Okay.
There is a very large amount of funding, and at this point, it's not going as quickly as some of the
Correct.
earlier rental assistance programs funding
Right.
did. Yes.
So, but we, as in the city of Largo, we don't have a different program in which someone could go online and apply for funding. Let's say they just needed their electric bill paid for last month or something.
No,
We're not doing
the
that
city
because
is not.
Okay.
But
You're
we
directing.
we have provided funding to a couple of nonprofits with some of the federal stimulus money so that they can provide that kind of eviction assistance.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Well, just by the way that reads, it kind of, the new factors, streamlining rent and utility assistance programs, to me reads like we offer something.
We were referring there to the county's program.
Okay.
Because that is our that is our largest amount of resources that are available at the current time.
Okay.
And then in terms of immediate actions, we obviously, because we are seeing an increased need for homeless individuals to be served, we are looking at the subrecipient contract agreements that we have with all of the subrecipients to ensure that they're spending their funding in a timely manner, so that if they're not, we can pull that funding back and reallocate it to other nonprofits in order to meet some of the community need that we've heard about earlier in the presentation. And as you know, you've also made that commitment that we're trying to move forward with the Seminole Square apartment complex, and hope to hear towards the end of this calendar year whether or not they are going to be awarded the low-income housing tax credits through the state.
Do we still have a mechanism if a landlord has income qualified tenants for things like an air conditioner that's more economical, like if they're at the end of their life on that air conditioner, can a tenant or a landlord that has income qualified tenants and whatever threshold of rent, are they able to access any of that money to help offset the cost of that?
At the current time, they're not. We are in the process of reevaluating essentially what would be a rental rehabilitation program that would allow landlords that are serving income eligible households to be able to apply for either a loan or a grant to make those kinds of improvements, which would be a benefit obviously to the property owner, but also would have another benefit for the tenant as well.
I think in looking at that, I think we should have a keen eye on the rents going forward, because if they're paying $800 a month right now, which is affordable for like a 2-bedroom 1-bath, it's probably cheap for a 2-bedroom 1-bath in Largo right now. But if it's in need of some repair, and it makes the house more efficient for the tenant, we need some insurance that rent doesn't go up after these repairs are made, regardless of, if the tenant stays the same, and the tenant may be income qualified and that type of stuff. So I think that's an important thing that we need to do.
Yes. We will certainly do that.
Vice Mayor Robinson got us off subject, so sorry.
I was just trying to transition to the next subject.
Thank you.
No, it's all on subject, no worries. Okay, next slide, please.
Just sees.
Okay, moving through the continuum of success, the security and education category, some new factors that are emerging in housing, in understanding housing needs in your community is understanding the racial gap in home ownership rates, both from the public and nonprofit sector. And that is something that the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is looking at, which is a newly created committee from Pinellas County. And then Cheryl's going to talk about some of our immediate actions in this category.
So to build on a comment that Mayor Brown just made, the importance of ensuring that as we move forward, both in home ownership, not home ownership, but if we were to provide funding for landlords to serve their tenants, as well as with the affordable housing developments, the multifamily developments where there are tenants that are expected to have a certain income range in order to occupy those units that are deemed to be affordable. One of the challenges is that is very intensive work to qualify a particular household and determine exactly what their income is and exactly what type of unit they might benefit from. So just to let you know that we are continuing to provide technical assistance to some of the multifamily developments that have recently been built, because it is an ongoing, that's one of our challenges is the private sector developers, this is not their expertise. And so Arrow and her team are continually providing that kind of technical support, and we're finding that that's what we need to do in order to ensure that the eligible households are being served. We are also evaluating the possible adoption of a tenant's bill of rights. We'd like to potentially bring that forward for your consideration in the future. And then, always looking for ways to ensure that we are getting the information out in the community. We are making some updates to our website to make it much clearer, particularly in the housing arena, so that if you go to our website in the very near future, you're going to be able to see if you are a developer and you're looking for what kinds of programs we have available, you'll be able to go right to that information. If you are a prospective tenant looking for housing, you can go to another page on a website. And if you're a homeowner looking to purchase, so we're going to try to make sure that we've got our information as accessible as we possibly can.
Any questions in the security and education category? Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, in the final category of sustainability, some of our emerging factors here are the LEAP update, the Largo Environmental Action Plan, which will be updated to become a community-led and community-driven sustainability and resilience action plan. We also have a community engagement process that's planned for next year, both as part of LEAP and overall regarding our city services, to understand if we're providing the right services at the right level to the right areas of our community to help us with some service gap analysis. And then finally, continuing to reduce barriers to affordable housing development, maybe through things like the new Clearwater Largo Road Plan or the homeless transition plan that was approved for development in the FY22 budget. So in terms of some immediate actions, continuing to actively promote our existing affordable housing programs that you heard Cheryl talking about, do active recruitment of affordable housing developments, and continue our focus on green initiatives and improving our own service delivery in a way that's sustainable to help kind of reinforce sustainability throughout the community. Any questions in the sustainability bucket?
Just to back up, do we have links on the city website to the county website where people can fill out these applications? So we're already linked to the county?
Yes, we do.
All right.
We also have it, it's on the city's main page, and it's also available on the Largo Library. They have a special section for e-governmental resources, and we're constantly updating that information as well.
Okay, thanks.
So in conclusion, we did talk about the limitations from the pandemic, and in addition to that, we still are unsure when and if the homeless point in time count will happen in calendar year 2022. Some opportunities ahead for us are, of course, the American Rescue Act, or Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and also our Community Recovery Committee that we activated during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is an internal committee focused on providing recommendations and understanding community needs and how we can recover from COVID-19. They do have a series of recommendations for the American Rescue Plan Act funding, and they're continuing to refine those and look at some of these emerging issues as well. And then I think at the City Commission level, it's also really important that the policy advocacy for housing solutions happens, this year in the upcoming session as well, and we will have that as a legislative priority going forward. So next steps, you all are probably aware that there has been a Safe Harbor work group, and they've been working on evaluating the impact and the needs at Safe Harbor. That group is looking at a final report here before the end of the calendar year that we hope to be able to share. We're continuing to explore partnerships for rapid rehousing and housing navigation services. And then we'll continue to explore all the opportunities we talked about here tonight and bring back recommendations to the City Commission. So the last slide, which is, I don't know if everyone had a chance to see this, but I'm sure you remember during the retreat, we had an illustrator kind of by accident. They accidentally sent him to us, so he stayed and drew the picture of our retreat. So I just leave that there as a summary of our discussion in connection to our policy issues. So with that, we would be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
So, Mayor, what's the goal of the Safe Harbor or group that, what's their goal? I don't know, Officer Steiner or Arrow, if one of y'all could speak to that.
So the Safe Harbor Work Group came out of the mayor's letter to the county and I think to the sheriff and HLA to convene a group to look at how to get better outcomes from Safe Harbor, but also really mitigate the impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods as well as on the emergency services. So we have had a group that's been meeting pretty much monthly since the spring. We've got representatives from Safe Harbor, obviously, HLA, myself, Major Coyle's been involved. Officer Steiner came to the last one, and also Lieutenant Anthony from our fire services is on there. We did have a representative from Pinellas Park on. We're waiting for a replacement. She's out on leave at the moment, but basically what's coming out of it, kind of like our data showed for our 2H calls, that you have this, this percent that is your chronic homeless population, then you've got the transient folks. And we're coming to the realization it's really got to be two different strategies to address those different populations. And so it may look at differing levels of ratio of case management to clients, for example, or connections to workforce and things like that.
And sorry for interrupting, but right now, I think the case manager, or that ratio is in the hundreds to one,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So that, that's never, ever going to be effective to do anything. I know, and I could be wrong here, but my understanding of originally Safe Harbor was kind of a jail deferrent program to keep people from going to jail. And now it seems like it's more of just a place to put people, to out of sight, out of mind type of thing. And obviously we've seen a lot of the repercussions. I know the mayor's letter to the county and to the sheriff kind of addressed some of those issues, but if the structure and the goals of Safe Harbor are not changed, none of that's ever going to make a difference. If we don't have, one person can't do anything for 400 people. You just can't do it. It is impossible to do any type of good. And I'm not, I don't know what the answer is. That's way above my pay grade. But, I think that I'm appreciative of what you guys are doing. I think, coming out of that, we need to have some actionable items that the county's willing to help with, and as well as everybody else. I know a lot of municipalities participate and put money towards Safe Harbor. Maybe that needs to be increased, maybe, whatever that is, but there needs to be some sort of actionable item to come out of Safe Harbor. Especially if is it providing substance abuse help? Because obviously, if the main place that's providing those services in Pinellas County is no longer there, what are we doing for substance abuse in Pinellas County? You know, I mean, again, it's probably above y'all's pay grade too, and maybe I'm just venting a little bit, but it just seems like we're barely treading water, you know, and we have a lot of great goals. We have a lot of good things that we're trying to work on. It's a fantastic team that we put together here in the city of Largo. But at the end of the day, what are we going to what are we actually going to be able to do to take care of any of the these issues? And again, I'm not trying to downplay anything that you guys are doing by any means. Trust me, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate everybody that's out there and what they're doing, especially, you know, Officer Steiner and you know, being out on the street and dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. That's fantastic. Some of the success stories are great, but you know, let's go back to the safe harbor. It's just, I don't understand what the purpose of that is, other than just some place for every other municipality around us to hide their problems. I mean, that's what it seems like it is. And then, you know, then we have all those issues that come out of that. Which,
I hear completely what you're saying. We've been wrestling with a lot of those. I think at the beginning, Lieutenant Hayes from Safe Harbor gave a really good presentation to the group on some of that history, on the why, reflecting on that before that, with growing street homeless population and police departments and the sheriff's office having no other choice except for jail for someone for public urination or public drunkenness, like the things that you really don't need to be in a jail cell for. And so it came out of that. So on that diversion aspect, kind of reminding that, yes, it's diverting from jail, but it's most of the items are for people that are, you know, committing things that are minor ordinance offenses. And now we're seeing in the data that instead of them going through that whole process, they're often bringing them to Safe Harbor instead of going to jail and then transporting.
right, and there's no follow-up services that go with that. So all those people that, I mean, you're not peeing in the street because you just want to. Most people, you know, I mean, you're not sleeping on a bench because you want to. I mean, most of those things are not happening because that's where they want to be. It's because there's a lot of underlying issues that go with that. So when we or anybody else put somebody in Safe Harbor without going through the processes of, like, I'm not in favor of putting people in jail for public urination. I mean, that's ridiculous. But my concern is that there's no other follow-up with any of those folks that are there, and then you just have this continuing problem. So, you know, Officer Steiner could probably speak to it for a day about, you know, all the people that he's seen coming out of there. So, again, it's just, my frustration is I'm not trying to levy it on you, but it's frustrating to see all of these things that we're trying to do, and again, it seems like we're treading water.
Is that group with Safe Harbor, are they looking at what services should be provided to the folks that are going to that facility, and then maybe a strategy as to who provides it or how it's paid for?
We haven't got into the who provides and how it's paid for at this point. We've done a lot of data collection and mapped out the general recommendations, but we haven't gotten into that part. The main reason is there's a lot of extra funding that's out right now, and there's also funding that comes out on a routine basis through different federal agencies, for example, on substance abuse or mental health services. So it might not just be what's here now, but it might be seek grant funding for XYZ. Also, the county, as I mentioned, is I don't know if they've gotten them yet, but they had some grant applications in specifically for some additional services to provide both at Bayside and through a street outreach medical team. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that too, because some of those items, they definitely align with what we're thinking of also, and they may already be in play to be implemented. So, but definitely the things you brought up are things we wrestle with. For example, when you put more criteria on entry,
Right.
then you have people that say, forget it, I'm not going.
Right.
So, and then we've also got, there's no other shelter that's open 24/7. So how do we make it work better as a stop to get someone in permanent housing versus just cycling through? So we're working on it.
And that's
It is a big
exactly
mountain.
what my thought process is I understand the need. I believe that there is a need, that it's obvious there's a need for a facility like Safe Harbor, but not as a parking lot, not as just somewhere to put people so that we don't have to talk about it anymore. There needs to be the follow-up, needs to be there. There needs to be more than one case manager per 300 or 400 people. All of those things need to happen. And again, that's going to cost money, obviously, and whether that comes from the city of Largo or surrounding communities or the county or all of those, probably that's the answer. But I mean, if we're really going to have a conversation about tackling any of those things, we need to understand, as this commission needs to understand as a group, that it's going to cost money. But this doesn't just go away putting a slideshow up.
If I may,
Yes, sir.
we've talked about this for years, but the umbrella of homelessness, in my opinion, is way too large. Because there's a difference between that family or someone living in their car it's in between housing and we're trying to get them and they're receptive. There's a difference between that and the person with all the other issues you mentioned, who is, in the days before Safe Harbor, they would have just been arrested every weekend for disorderly intox or failure to appear for a notice to appear violation, whatever, all these little offenses. And you are correct, in the early days it was a diversion, it was an alternative to arrest. So the problem that we face as a community is we've taken that scenario from all over the county and warehoused it right at the border of the city of Largo. And I know you've had this conversation with the sheriff, but we have an inordinate concentration of these types of cases right at our border. So when we talk about all these other things about affordable housing and stuff, everybody's not under that same.
No, and I completely agree with that, and I think that you're talking about chronic homelessness and folks that are probably going to be at Safe Harbor are not the folks that we're going to be able to necessarily, the family that's living in their car that was talked about earlier.
Well, they won't take them at another provider because of behavior issues or
right.
Other,
but that's so my point is though is that Safe Harbor, then if we're going to warehouse those folks and it's going to be essentially in the city of Largo, then. And I'm not saying we, but there needs to be services provided at that are functional, that do something, that can maybe prevent some of those issues from happening, reoccurring over and over and over. That way we don't have all those issues that you and that we've all talked about, the services that we have to provide and all those things. So
well, what we've done is we've taken an overcrowded jail and an overcrowded docket at the courthouse for status offenses, and we've done something different with it now and put everybody at Safe Harbor. So our community, the neighborhoods around Safe Harbor are dealing with these folks where they were otherwise wouldn't be.
I don't hear a whole lot of stories of people coming out of Safe Harbor in a better position than when they went in.
No.
You hear that with other programs.
Well, it's my understanding that Safe Harbor, even though people can stay there for more than one day, but it's more or less just a revolving door. And if you're going to have people who are going to come in for 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, whatever, they're never going to get the services that they need because these things take a longer period of time. From my point of view, if we were going to invest in anything, we ought to invest in more detox beds and more treatment beds. That's what we need for these people. Because you're never going to get enough counselors. And what are you going to do to a guy, for a man or a woman who's there for 1 night? What are you going to say? Boy, you really ought to go to detox. And that's it. So if we're going to invest, let's invest in something that's more treatment-oriented rather than just a good word, Mr. Vice Mayor,
whether it's
instead
at
of
Safe
warehousing.
Harbor or Largo Med, the treatment needs to be there.
Yeah.
That's not happening now. That's my point.
Yeah, and
I don't
they're
care
not
where we're
going
doing
to
it.
get
Somebody's
it
gotta
there.
do it,
So if there were more beds, and I saw somebody nodding his head in the back, if there were more beds and more long-term treatment, 28-day treatment programs and all that, if there were more beds for that, you could start to move some of these people out. You're always going to get people like that. You're always going to get folks who are going to go to Safe Harbor, but if you want to at least change the population, they need treatment. For that, and I do agree that homelessness has, there are a lot of buckets of homelessness, you know, but for these folks, if we're talking about that, they need treatment. You know, that's the only way that you're gonna change that.
So with
Instead of three
Safe
hots and a cot.
I think we're doing a little bit of preaching to the choir, because nobody knows these
Yeah,
guys
again, I wa-
better
Well, but
than,
we do have
better
ARPA
than these
funds,
folks
we
that
do
are
have
sitting right
ARPA
over
funds,
here.
and maybe we can devote some of those ARPA funds. I don't know if we're allowed to, but maybe we could devote some of those ARPA funds to funding more detox beds, you know? I don't know if we're allowed. Are we allowed, Mr. Schubert?
We're going to be evaluating that as to what exactly you can use the ARPA funds for, and that's going to be part of our presentation. The final guidelines have still not been issued as to exactly how you can use that money.
Oh, well.
So we're still working through it, but yeah, that might potentially be a possible use for some of it.
And you're right, Mayor, I was preaching.
I'm just saying. I mean, these guys, know, these people know this.
What we are doing is reinforcing to these guys how this commission feels.
Right,
yeah, probably.
Received
We're on your
loud and
side, we're on
clear.
your side, definitely on your
Yes,
side.
we'll see. Yeah, it's a big challenge, but
Yeah.
you know, I appreciate the commission saying we know this is a problem and we want to address it and not just know it could never
Yes.
be anything else than it is. So we're hoping we can come up with some ideas on how to make it different.
I commend you all. I know that just 3 years ago, we didn't have a homeless task team. And what you guys are doing now is really helping a lot of people, and thank you for that.
There were many years ago, there was, and I won't name names, but there was a member of the commission who adamantly said that we don't have homeless people in Largo. We do.
One shining light that's already come out of our Safe Harbor team is the increased communication between our street outreach, and there's a community policing team in the High Point area through the sheriff's department, and so they're regularly meeting now to discuss, especially if someone's moving from one area to the next, they can work on it together. I think you guys have coordinated on some encampments together as well already too, so that's already a win in the bucket from that group.
I'm sorry, Michael.
No, I'm good.
I'll just finish my thought and get out of your way. If we could dedicate the amount of time and energy and money, resources that we dedicate to chasing chronic safe harbor people around and refocus that money on people who really would be receptive and eligible for other assistance, we'd be miles ahead. Because, you know, I'm sure that Officer Steiner drops somebody off at Safe Harbor occasionally and says, "I'll see you tomorrow." You know? But, so I wish there were a way we could refocus that.
I don't know if it was a good idea to begin with. I really don't know.
I'm sorry.
No. Just curious, and I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sad that I didn't know this. How many day labor locations are there in Largo?
That's a good question. I think there's one or two new ones that opened up. I can get that information for you. I'm not sure.
And I was three. And on that map you were showing where?
One's Missouri, and then just north of Rosary. The other one's Clearwater, Largo, and Ford. The other one's East Bay, and just west of Melcher.
We did ask our community standards officer that's on our task team to reach out to the other ones that she's been working with on the sleeping in bush problem, to tell them about the van service as being used by one of the others, to hopefully motivate them to set up a similar type of arrangement where they could get that van service.
And I think part of the problem with those day labor places is that they're not making enough money to get out of the situation, and they're basically just getting enough money to get through the day. Whatever it is. It's alcohol.
You had to buy another
They're
bottle
never
of
getting
cheap
ahead.
wine.
Right.
Right.
Another bottle of Thunderbird.
And it was interesting we say this, and Vice Mayor made a good, we all very passionate about this. It was interesting, I was listening to Secretary Fudge on an interview, and she was talking kind of about housing, but everything tied into it. And she said, the mayors, mainly of all cities, said we're basically trying to chase the tail of the tiger every time. And this seems to be that thing where I like what we're doing, and I agree. I just feel it's kind of be a very difficult. And how does an organization, if they were interested, want to partner to help homeless, our causes or what we're fighting? If let's say a church or a community group wanted to get involved, would I send them to you?
Yes, and that's fine. Or Homeless Leadership Alliance, I think they also have like a needs list for different places. I would encourage things like welcome home baskets for people that are being rehoused as one option. There are places where food is available, so instead of, especially with the sanitation risks with open, making, feeding locations and so forth, we'd recommend something like that, or working at, volunteering at some of the shelters to help serve at the shelters for things like that as well. So, but yeah, we've talked to a few different churches about how they want to help. So,
Safe Harbor also has a list of what they need on their website as well.
If I could just touch on Pinellas Hope, that is like the go-to place for me. If I could get someone into Pinellas Hope, I don't remember what the numbers were on there, but I think it was close to 50% that actually go into permanent housing, which is fantastic.
Right.
And that's why when I get a referral to Pinellas Hope and they actually show up, I'm actually confident that something is getting done. There are those wraparound services there, whereas Safe Harbor does not provide that.
Well, Pinellas Hope also requires that you not drink, you have no drugs and all that.
And
So
that's why
they're-
when I get someone who wants to go there, I'm like, okay, this one actually, they want to get back on their feet.
Right.
They're ready to do it. The right thing.
Yeah, but but Safe Harbor is the chronic situation.
And the problem with Pinellas Hope is they only intake on Tuesdays. So one day a week. So I get calls on Tuesday and they're like, I want to get in. I'm like, well, next Tuesday. And then they're like, I don't know, never mind.
What's their occupancy? They're close to 100% all the time anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, usually they had to, I think they shut down I don't know if they shut it down due to a COVID reason or if they were full. But they didn't have an intake for, I think it was last week. So I'm not sure if that was full.
they're a tricky one for resiliency also. They still do have some tents at the location, so we get a really bad afternoon summer storm and 4 tents are taken out and they're costly to replace. They're also in a flood zone there, so that is something kind of thinking long term too, that one of our bigger individual shelters is in a very vulnerable area in our county.
They were building those casitas.
They did do some of the shipping container modifications. I think there's 3 units that kind of look like little cabins on a boat almost. There's a little bed and everyone's got their own window and AC, but they're very limited on that. They do have some medical respite on site, but again, that's in like an old mobile home that's been retrofitted out there. So just, yeah, it's in a vulnerable spot, but they do great services out there.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Can I just confirm direction
Please,
really
yes.
quickly? Thank you. We talked about a lot of things, so I want to make sure I got everything. So we're looking at the rental assistance for affordable housing property owners, so looking to make some changes there. In terms of the continuum of success, we're focusing on that emergency response and stability bucket and continuing to look to build capacity with our nonprofit partners and add the needed services at Pinellas Safe Harbor, with a focus on an investment in treatment options, knowing that that's the best way to solve the problem. And then in terms of long-term solutions, evaluating our policies and our development regulations to encourage more affordable housing. That
I thought you were going to miss that last one because I had it written down right here.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great work, thank you. What a great team.
All right, does anybody have a board or committee report for us?
Just real quick, obviously, I don't have much to say about this Pinellas or PSDA since we spent a good time on that today. Other than that, just the Suncoast League of Cities, it will be meeting this Friday at 12 o'clock. It's a virtual meeting hosted by the City of Seminole. Everybody should have received an invite. If not, I don't know, maybe Carson, if you could maybe forward it on to them if you have it. Just if you'd like to attend, it should be more than an hour. I'm just going to discuss our legislative priorities for the upcoming session and, pretty much outside of that, just some business approving a contract and some other things. So that's it.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead.
I'm on the Area Agency for Aging for Pasco and Pinellas, the advisory committee. We did meet yesterday. Not a lot to say about the meeting. We did go over our goals and our plans for 2022. We'll also be zooming into the board's advocacy committee meeting, and I believe that's coming up in October, and I can report on that after that meeting too, because that's where they'll be discussing all their advocacy efforts for the coming year. And if we could put the AAAPP on the board and committee reports, I would report every time we meet.
And just from Ford Pinellas, at the last meeting, we did have, it's not in Largo, well, it's in the county, but it's Largo in my view. They did a land use change from residential low medium to residential high, 1.14 acres on 20th Terrace Southwest, off of Seminole Boulevard, right behind, I think there's a new boxing ring. There's an empty lot back there. The applicant's looking at developing single-family attached residential subdivision in that area. I can get more information once that goes through the county on that development, since that isn't an area that we are looking or trying to get with the affordable development on Seminole Gardens, I think it was called. And then also there was an article, and I'll send it to Carson to get out. We approved. Oh, crud, I lost it. Oh, no, okay. They approved $11 million tech project to reduce congestion and accidents on, I believe it's US 19. US 19 and State Road 60. They're going to be doing new technology that embeds sensors into the road that can help people where, this is weird that I thought that they did it. And it was on ABC Action News that they talked a little bit more. But it's technology that can go to your smartphone or a device or your car with Bluetooth, and it kind of tells you if there's a pedestrian coming up that's wanting to cross, or how close cars are to each other. It's something that they think is going to be a really impact on improving our transportation in the county. But technology, it always changes. So, but I'll get that information to Carson to get out to you all and see where that goes. And that's all I have.
Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council on Monday, I sent y'all a draft of the Regional Resiliency Action Plan. So please, if you take a look at that and give me any feedback, I can pass it along. It's early on in the process, but so it's a little bit lengthy right now, but if you could take a look at that, I'd appreciate it. They are going to be reaching out to our staff because one of the things they want to do is just get in front of some residents. And so I suggested that we have some pretty good avenues through the internet or whatever to reach out to our residents here in Largo. So please use that. Another interesting thing, I don't know it's an acronym, so you might know. Clear Sky Tampa Bay, SEIN, Solar Energy something team. But anyways, it was a short presentation on this initiative to look at increasing solar energy access to residents and businesses throughout the whole region. So the partners in this are the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, the Manatee County, Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, University of South Florida, and the City of Largo. That's the entire list. So I was pretty proud at that meeting, sitting there with 30 other cities and counties as the only city on that list of that important committee. So it was kind of, I wanted to share that with you guys. That's all I had from Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. Commissioner Carroll.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Smith.
I have nothing, thank you.
Vice Mayor Robinson.
Just real quick, I wanted to, Henry, make sure that those suggestions that I had spoke about a couple minutes ago, some of those came from Sean King over at Habitat.
Yes.
Do you mind, I don't know if I think I had sent that email to you at some point. If not, I can CC you in it. Is there a way if I send it to Carson to have him send it out? Or
Yeah, you can. I believe I had sent it to Cheryl, And I think it's been, they've been forwarded on to the committee that Commissioner Gerard is on.
I received it, and I received it, and I passed it on to Arrow, so she's very aware of it.
Is it okay if I pass it or send it to Carson and have him send it to the commission?
Oh, yeah,
so they can
absolutely.
see a little bit more in detail about what I was talking about?
Yes.
I'll CC you in it, so I'm gonna, actually, it's in the air now. So I just wanted, that's all I wanted to make sure of, just talk about that. I would like for, I don't necessarily need it as an action item, but in the very near future, if the committee speaks about it or whatever, if we can get a report or an update on that, because there's some things that we can do right now. We have some low-hanging fruit that this commission can make a decision on to change some of the, things that we do for low income housing and we get immediately. So.
Yeah, the committee will be making
Well, that's what I'm saying,
recommendations to the commission in December.
but my concern is, and nothing against the committee, but I don't want to have to wait. There's stuff that we can do right now.
Yeah.
The committee can come to us and make advisements, and I'm all in favor of that, but I'm just saying there's things that we can do today.
Yeah.
So if we can have a discussion about those in the near future, that'd be great. And then lastly, most important thing I'll talk about today, I wanted to congratulate my daughter Abby on winning her first volleyball game today.
All right.
That's the most important thing that happened today to me. I was sitting here, but I got a text, so we're good.
It's awesome. Commissioner Gerard.
Nothing really, except that I noticed that there were blocks of lights on the digital billboard, the city's digital billboard.
Can I answer it? Can I answer?
Again? Yeah.
Somebody threw a bicycle at somebody. And it
Threw a
hit-
bicycle at somebody?
Yeah, at one of our police officers. And the police officer moved out of the way, not thinking about the fact that there was an expensive sign behind him.
So we disciplined him now. No, we haven't.
So we're training those guys how to catch bikes.
Ducking his responsibility there.
So, somebody threw their bicycle at an officer. The officer got out of the way of the bicycle, and then it hurt the sign.
Which sign?
So, at Central Park.
Like a teenager or
Man, I wish
just?
he had a body.
It was,
you know?
Is that what happened to Prince of Peace as well? The church?
I'm not sure.
Across from the high school?
But it's we're working with the sign folks to get it fixed.
Yeah, we're going to get it fixed as soon as we can.
We're talking to the police officer about catching bicycles.
Yeah. Is there a course you can take for that?
Probably not. I was actually when I noticed it, I think right away, and I was happy that it's an awful story, but I was happy that we knew the story rather than it was just some random act of vandalism or that type of thing. So
So wouldn't you have, if the individual, wouldn't they be responsible?
yeah, but it probably wasn't their bike. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
When did that,
Sorry,
when did that happen?
a month ago, a month and a half.
Yeah,
A
at
little while
least,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those teenagers.
And like anything else, it's probably difficult to get the parts for to repair the sign.
Commissioner Finger.
I have nothing, thank you.
The only thing I had on my list was I wanted to congratulate Abby on her volleyball.
Right, awesome.
Awesome. Mr. Schubert.
So which Olympics are you planning on her participating in?
Look, I don't have that kind of dedication, so we'll see.
I have nothing this evening.
Thank you. Action items.
The only one I had was the request by Commissioner Gerard that the Area Agency on Aging be added to the list of boards and committees for monthly reports.
Perfect. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Congratulations, Abby, that's cool. Good for you, Abby.